Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions down in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs today and in the future. Next slide, please. We serve a very broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Marley Mesabov, who is a content strategist with a passion for the user experience. Her work spans websites, web applications, and mobile for enterprise companies and startups across the country. She is an editor at UX Booth and a frequent conference speaker. Marley can also be found on Twitter with the handle of Mars and the Stars, where she shares thoughts on user experience design, content strategy, and the Muppets. You can learn more about her and her work at http://marley.us. Without further ado, welcome Marley.
Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here. I'm very excited to be speaking with all of you. I'm based out of Boston. We've been snowed in all week, so I got to be honest, the only speaking event I was going to be able to do this week was one where I could be in my own home. So welcome to my office today. Like Adam said, I'm a UX specialist, I'm a content strategist, and so I end up seeing a lot of different parts of the design process. And I'm often faced with this question of, what does collaboration do for us? And sometimes, well, frequently, I look at things and I say, okay, well, what makes our projects work well? What makes projects run smoothly? See, I used to be a project manager. When I first got into UX, I was working at an agency as a project manager, and I was hearing all the designers talk about this UX stuff they did, and I was learning some of it, whatever I needed to help them along with the project. But it was really my job to figure out how to make us as efficient as possible and how to get us serving the user needs as much as possible. And that's an interesting combination. You know, UX specialists, anybody in the UX field is thinking about how do we serve the user needs and the business goals. The project manager is saying, okay, well, sure, how can we solve the user needs, but also how can we be efficient? How can we make sure that our project is successful in the eyes of our client, of our own company? What are the metrics that we're going to use to measure that? And what I found was the most successful projects, time and again, were run by really collaborative teams that were used to working well together and could allow themselves to work without politics and without back-talking and all of the things that come up when you put people in a room together. And I'll tell you, it really reminds me of being in high school. See, when I was in high school, I was a music kid. I spent every lunch period in the music room. I was in orchestra and string ensemble and concert choir and treble choir and the after-school choir. And a lot of my friends were musicians as well, string players or winds players and some singers. And at lunchtime, instead of going down to the cafeteria, we would eat our lunch in the music room. And it was great. I loved these people. I loved hearing about their days. I loved just talking about whatever came up. But it did sort of frustrate me that sometimes the other music kids would start to talk about how much they hated being, having to deal with those really obnoxious jocks, those stupid sports kids. And the reason it got to me was that, well, every day after school, I was one of those jocks. It was cross country. It's not like I was a soccer kid. But still, I hung out with people in the locker room. I went for long runs with people who also considered themselves to be jocks, the sports kids, those same people that my music friends have been disparaging. And we'd have good conversations, and we'd really just you kind of space out on a long run and have deep conversations about what was going on in your life. But sometimes they would start to talk about the kids they hated most, you know, those stuck-up, snobby speech and debate geeks. And it gave me this pit in my stomach because, well, you guessed it, every other week I spent the afternoon in the library with the speech and debate kids because I was a speech and debate kid. And these are some of the smartest people I knew. They were geeks. They were eccentric. They knew every line to Ghostbusters. I mean, we were a little stereotypical, but I loved it. I loved hanging out with them. I loved spending the time in the library. I loved the conversations we'd have. I loved all the things that I learned from those conversations. And it only started to frustrate me when they would talk about their least favorite people in school. You know, those snobby, stuck-up music kids. So what does this have to do with the real world? Come on, we all told ourselves when we were in high school, just get through high school and then you get to the real world. Ta-da, now we're in the real world. And as an ex-project manager, when I hear my fellow content strategists talking about those obnoxious project managers who give them terrible deadlines without even considering what we actually have to do, and then I'm hanging out with, you know, my friends who are project managers, and they're telling me how completely unreasonable the UX team is being and how those designers just don't seem to care if we get anything on time. And that kind of makes me feel gross. And then I'm talking to UX designers, and they're telling me how this whole project would be so much better if they just didn't have to deal with content strategists. And I'm like, I really just want to go sit in a room with the other content strategists and I want to be back in the music room. I want to go back to having my lunch in a room with just one kind of people, just those of us who understand each other and don't have to explain ourselves and won't be attacked by anybody else, and we'll just get to do our work and then press a button and send it on to the next people when we're done. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, wait a second. That's a silo. Huh. So we hear this word tossed around a lot, silo. And it seems to apply to any situation where we've just shut ourselves in a room and we're not talking to people working on other pieces of the project. I don't think a silo is necessarily always a bad thing. I think a silo sort of naturally happens as you start to spend more time with other people who excel in your field. And obviously it's useful to learn more about your field and to excel in your field. But at the extreme, it means a lack of communication with everybody else. I actually interviewed at a company once where they showed me they had a whole floor just dedicated to their content strategists. It was amazing. The designers were on a totally different floor. The developers were actually in a different building across town. And all I could think was, God, it was so peaceful. It was so calm. But when you think about it, it's peaceful and calm until the day that the designer, who literally was supposed to finish their design and then hit send, and it would upload to the internet that everybody shared, and the content strategist would get an email saying, hey, time to go add messaging, and they would go into the layout and add their messaging, and then they would upload it back, and an email will go to the developer saying, time to code it. But then let's imagine that one day the designer has sent it on and realizes, oh, they forgot to add something. And so they go back in and they see that the content strategist has put right in the middle of their beautiful banner a video, which is not what was supposed to be in that banner. That banner was specifically a carousel for images and copy. And so the designer comes down to the content strategist's office and says, what are you doing? And the content strategist says, well, video is our main way of communicating with these users, but you didn't incorporate that into the design at all. And the designer says, well, I didn't know I needed to. I was using my best understanding of what was most visually attractive here. We decided it was going to be a banner with a large header text and a small image behind it. No video. And they say, okay, well, you know what, we can work this out. So they revamp the design. They include a new container just for videos, send it off to the developer. The developer takes one look at it and says, hell no. When I scoped out this project, I gave my estimates based on using the templated approach, not this new customized version of this design. Uh-oh. what are we going to do now? And if you just push ahead and try to make it go as though we could be in this nice little conveyor belt where it just goes one to the next to the next to the next, what are we going to end up with? We're going to end up with content that fits really awkwardly into the design and functionality that doesn't seem quite right, and it just doesn't integrate correctly. And I mean, it's just a fragmented UX. Now, I didn't make this company up. It's actually a place that I interviewed at. And I bet that some of you have worked for other companies that have this exact same problem. In our effort to make the project go, quote unquote, smoothly, we've stopped paying attention to how we can make the work collaborative and how we can get all of that information to everyone and make sure that we're not in silos. But I'm not going to pretend that letting everybody out of the silos and just combining all the information is easy. It's difficult. It's really difficult. We end up with, oh gosh, let's see, we end up with having to talk to people, having to deal with things that we don't agree with, having to compromise without compromising the experience. But I believe it can be done. I believe that it gets a lot easier to leave our silos and share information and end up with a really smooth process and a successful product if we take a combination of agile development, collaboration, and user experience practices. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at each of these elements. We'll go through what areas of agile we can really make use of, what we mean by working collaboratively, and how UX can really pull this all together. And I believe that using these various best practices, sort of different elements, different ideas, different areas that we work within, we can end up with really successful projects that don't have fragmented UX. So we'll kick off with Agile. A lot of people are talking about Agile lately. It's really popular, and yet I think we're not paying enough attention to the fact, to what it actually is. It's like this giant game of telephone has been going on. And as a result, people say, oh, we're working in Agile. Oh, really? What are you doing? Oh, we've decided that everything's due next week. Okay, that's not Agile. That's just a short due date. So let's talk about what Agile really is. First of all, most people are familiar with waterfall methodology. Waterfall methodology is a type of design and development methodology where you separate each element out and you set deadlines, and each deadline has to be complete before the next one can begin. Hence waterfall. So let's assume that we have to create all the functionality, the content, the design, and the development for a project. We would say, all right, well, if we've got 4 weeks to do it and each of these items takes about a week to do, then that's how we split it out. Week 1 we'll work on functionality. When that's done, we'll move on to the content. When that's done, we'll move on to design. When that's done, the developers will be the only ones left working. They're working in week 4. Done. Agile methodology says, wait a second. If we've got 4 weeks, why don't we take the first week and do a little bit of functionality and a little bit of content and a little bit of design and develop that and make a prototype, see how it works, reevaluate, and now in week 2 we'll do the whole thing again with just a little bit more, or improving a little bit, and then we'll do it again and again and again. So the idea is that you get a sort of quote-unquote completed project much earlier, and then you're able to iterate on it and make it better and better and better. Does that sound complicated? I mean, I'm going to assume that everybody's nodding because it is complicated. In fact, it's complicated because that's not what Agile was meant to do. Agile was originally created just for developers. It's a lot easier to say a group of developers are going to start with one iteration and then build and build and build off of it. It's a lot harder to say we're going to get content and design and interaction and development all working together in such a short period of time. It's really tough. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. In fact, when I read over the Agile Manifesto, which was created by some developers who were looking to improve the development team's ability to create prototypes quickly and then build better products, I look at that and I say, yeah, we can do that in design as well. We can do that in content as well, as long as we focus on the basics. These are the basics of the Agile Manifesto. And you can actually find this. Do a Google search for Agile Manifesto, and you will find their website. And what they say is, we are looking to create better software by valuing individuals and interactions over processes and tools, by valuing working software over comprehensive documentation, by valuing customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and by valuing the ability to respond to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. I cannot tell you how many people forget that last part. I can't tell you how many project managers have said to me, oh, no, don't bother documenting anything. We're doing Agile, we don't do documentation. That's not Agile. Agile is, of course you want documentation, but if you only have 2 hours to work on the project today and you have a choice of completing some documentation or completing the working software, you focus on making the software work. Doesn't mean we don't have contracts, doesn't mean we don't negotiate. It means that if we have the choice between working hand in hand, doing either some co-designing or user research or anything that encourages customer collaboration, that's more important than negotiating the contract. Certainly doesn't say we can't have a plan. Certainly doesn't say we can't have a process. It says that we need to make sure that the process isn't working, that we pay more attention to the people who are working on this. The manifesto then breaks down, this is sort of their mission statement, I would say, and then they break it down into 12 principles. The first principle is that our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Makes sense? That's the point of the iterations. We also welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Now that's really cool. That's something that Waterfall can't do. If we've already done our research, created our content, put together a design that conveys that messaging, and now we're about to start development, which is essentially late in the process in Waterfall, and requirements change, God, you have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. In Agile, if you change the requirements, it just shifts your focus for this sprint. Number 3, we deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale. This is where I think a lot of people misunderstand Agile and say, well, the main goal is to deliver working software frequently. So we are going to accomplish this entire giant task in 2 months instead of 6 months. But what Agile is actually saying is cut it down. Get back to basics. As my middle school French teacher would like to say, keep it simple, stupid. KISS. And that's the goal. We want to deliver the working software frequently by breaking it into smaller, more manageable chunks, not by forcing everybody to work in a very, very short time period. And there will be more on that later. Number 4 is that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Makes sense. Surprising how infrequently we do that. We build projects around motivated individuals and give them the environment and support that they need. This, to me, is like the longer explanation of the part in the manifesto that says we value individuals over process. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information is face-to-face. Again, something we kind of forget. Now, I love that I can just quickly IM a message to somebody and not have to worry about if they're in a meeting and know that they'll get back to me as soon as they see it. And I love that if there's something really important going on and I feel that I want to make sure that we can save it for later because we're going to need it again, that I should send it in an email, and that way everybody has access to it many, many different times. Speaking face-to-face doesn't mean you can't do those other things. It just means that if you really need somebody's attention, If you really want to be efficient, and we all know this is true, sending an IM or an email just doesn't go as quickly, just not as easy to handle. Number 7, working software is the primary measure of progress. So not working completed documentation and not completed comps, not pixel-perfect designs, but having something that works. Number 8, agile processes promote sustainable development. This is what I meant when I said we get back to the idea that the getting things done in a faster time frame does not mean just shortening deadlines. It's not sustainable to expect your team to work 80 hours a week. It's not sustainable to expect everybody to absolutely cram and crunch to try and get everything together in a shorter time frame. What's sustainable is when they can maintain a constant pace indefinitely. And that's going to be a different amount of work for different people. There are people who enjoy spending 60 hours or 70 hours a week on work. But to expect that is not to create a sustainable process. Number 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Let's think about that one. It sounds so obvious, but continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. Essentially, that's what reminds us that we need to focus on quality and not just quantity. Altogether, what this is coming to mean is we need to make for smaller projects or smaller chunks of projects to be done in a smaller amount of time so that we can focus on quality. And number 10, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. Can't be more simple than that. Number 11, the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. So many managers will be relieved to hear that. And in order to do that and make it really work, that's where we're going to start pulling in some of the collaboration aspects. And number 12, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then adjusts its behavior accordingly. So these 12 principles, these tell us what we want to do. They tell us what our goals are, what really every team wants. And these principles state that feel that these are the elements that are needed. This is what is needed to make sure that we have something that is exactly what waterfall teams want as well. Obviously, everybody wants quality work and sustainable work and a reflective team and a team that puts out the best architectures. We all want that. So Agile says they think they've figured out how to get it. And I think they're right. I think once we start getting into Agile telephone and we start turning Agile into 85,000 different things, once we turn it into, oh, just shorten the deadlines, or Agile means we can't have documentation, or any of 1,000 different possibilities, then we're not using the principles as they were meant to be used. But if one of these particular principles really calls out to you, you can find it on the Agile Manifesto website, print it out, stick it over your desk. These are all really good reminders, and they all do help team members to feel that they're needed and to feel that they're appreciated, and also to be able to accomplish all of their work in a more effective and more efficient manner. So, like I said, Agile tells us those principles, those are what we want to do. But a lot of them sort of spoke to this vague people working together, developers and business partners communicating, talking face-to-face, a lot of stuff that if you're an introvert or even if you're just busy, kind of sounds like hard work. So how do we do it? Well, I think that we use 3 steps that build better collaboration. The first step is to keep your eye on the prize. The second step is to set expectations. And the third step is 3 magic words. I don't know. Not that I don't know what the third step is. Third step is acknowledging I don't know. We'll get there. So step 1, keep your eye on the prize. Now, I love my job. I love being a content strategist. Before I was a content strategist, I loved being a project manager. I loved working with other creative people. And I loved hearing their ideas and helping to put them together to be this bigger, better project. What I don't love is when it feels like some of my coworkers are working against me. Nobody likes that. But then I realized, you know, it's really unlikely that somebody is sitting at home thinking, how can I make Marley's day harder? How can I make sure that she can't get her work done? It's possible, but it's pretty unlikely. What's more likely is that they're trying to accomplish the same goals that I am. So, for example, if I'm thinking I need to learn enough about the user's needs and wants to be able to create effective messaging in a taxonomy that reflects their true vocabulary. So I need to be there during some user research. So I say to the user researcher, I know you're doing some user research tomorrow. Can I sit in? I'd like to sit in and just take some notes and listen to the conversation. I have a couple questions to add. And he says, oh no, sorry, I always do my research sessions by myself. Well, my first instinct is to say, no, I need to be there. You're stopping me from doing my job. What are you doing? But then I remember, he probably isn't sitting at home thinking, you know what, I bet it would really screw up Marley's workday if I don't let her sit in on the user research sessions. He's probably also thinking, what do I need to do to get the information that I'm looking for? And he's come to the conclusion that the best way to get that information is for him to be alone in the room with the participant. Different people work in different ways. We have to acknowledge that. Deborah Holstein says, to get the most out of your team, you have to respect and value that diversity. So that means I have to not respond by repeating what I want. I need to respect my user researcher. I need to ask maybe for some options. I need to let him know what my goals are and say, what do you recommend? Or would it be okay if I sat in if I promised not to say anything? And if he says no, then I say, okay, in that case, would you mind giving them my phone number or my email address as they're leaving and let them know to please contact me? Or even, could you send them across the hall to me when you're finished speaking with each of them so I can just have 5 minutes? Now if he's saying no to all of those options, then it's more likely he might have been sitting at home wondering how he could screw with my day. But the likelihood is that one of those will work. And so as long as I'm keeping my eye on the prize, remembering that my goal is not to be in the room, my goal is to learn about the user. And there's more than one way to get to that goal. Number 2, we need to set expectations. At this point, I'm pretty sure everybody has seen this comic, but I love it. What the customer really needed, how the engineer designed it, how the sales executive described it. We all look at things from different perspectives, and that causes problems. I had a conversation a couple years ago with a friend who works in content management, and he said, do you know what your problem is? Great way. Can't wait to hear what's coming next. He said, all of you content strategists, your problem is that I'm a content manager. All I want is something that's going to work with the CMS that we have. And yet you come in with all of these idealistic, pie-in-the-sky ideas that just don't make any sense. And I said, well, give me an example. What sort of CMS would you design? What sort of features are not pie in the sky? What are you looking for? And he said, well, I guess, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at some options. And I said, okay. So hypothetically, what if I brought you a list of every possible feature that you could have, and then we could go through it together and cross out anything that didn't work and circle the ones that do and make that into our wish list? And he said, that sounds great. So how did we get from, in the course of about 10 seconds, him telling me that content strategists are too idealistic, to telling me I could come up with a list of every single possible feature and we'd work through it together? Well, it's all about expectations. I'm willing to bet that his last content strategist put hours and hours and hours of work into coming up with the ideal set of features for the CMS, and was probably really disappointed if the client then started crossing out those features and saying these aren't ones I need and we need to add these other ones. And for my friend, the client in this case, incredibly frustrating to have a content strategist come in who he thinks is bringing a final product just to find he has to go through it with a red pen. But when I set the expectation that I'm not going to spend hours and hours on this, I'm going to spend about 20 minutes, and I'm going to do it one time so that I can reuse it for other clients, that just has a list of every feature I can think of, every feature that I've seen on other things, just all the features. Maybe I'll spend an hour on it, formatting it and organizing it nicely. But again, that's something I can then reuse. And if he's expecting that I'm going to come in with something that is, well, not perfect, not even a rough draft, I'm coming in with a brainstorm. Now we're on the same page. We've set a plan. We're going to touch base often on it. And then we'll write down and confirm what our final goals are, what our final decisions, rather, are. Moving on to number 3, the magic words. It's not please and thank you. Magic words are I don't know. Now, this comes down to a combination of humility and compassion. I am really, really bad at remembering humility and compassion, but I'm getting better at it. See, a couple years ago, I walked into one of my first projects as a full-fledged content strategist. I was really excited. I'd been asked to come in to bring a strategy, to walk through it with the team, and I open my laptop and I pull up my presentation and I start in on the first slide, and almost immediately the head of marketing cuts me off and starts talking about how this is wrong and we should be doing something else. And I immediately fell into the, oh, well, somebody older than me who's been working here for longer is talking. He must know a lot. I'll just listen to him. And then I started to get annoyed, because then he started talking about things that I did know a lot about. And I thought, I wish he'd give me a chance. And then I walked out of the room, and somebody a couple years younger than me, one of their interns maybe, came up and started telling me something, and I brushed them off immediately. And on my way home, all of a sudden it occurred to me that I'd done the same thing to that girl that the marketing director had done to me. And I realized that I need to walk into every situation remembering how I felt, that I thought, you know, I have a different perspective. I know some things about this. I need to walk into every situation remembering that regardless of age and regardless of experience even, I don't care if somebody is a freshman year of college, first internship ever. Just by the fact that they've lived a different life than I have, they have a different perspective. And I can learn something from that. And we have to hang on to that humility. Now the flip side of this is compassion. I get very used to thinking of developers as sort of our most valuable team members, just because they know all of these things that I don't know anything about. They know Ruby on Rails and Python and all these different languages that are so complex. I can barely do HTML, and it just impresses me so much that I end up in this situation where I kind of expect them just to understand the things that come easily to me. And so when I see a grammar mistake from a developer, I used to look at it and think in an email if they had a typo or grammar errors or even just were totally off on something a little bit more specialized, like identifying some goals for content. I'd look at that and I'd be like, well, that can't, what's he talking about? He must know more than that. And I realized you have to be compassionate for the developer, because even though he or she knows a lot more about some areas than I do, there are things that come easily to me that they know nothing about. And so I have to walk into the situation, and when I see something that doesn't make sense, instead of saying, why did you do that, I have to ask first, what is this? What can you tell me about it? What goals are you identifying here? And most importantly, what can I do to help you? Because sometimes once you start thinking in that way, what can I do to help my teammates? What can they do to help me? Then I'm relying on them for the knowledge that they have, for the subject area expertise that they have built within their little silo, and I'm communicating with them. And they, when I ask what can I do to help you, can lean on my subject area expertise. And we can start making sure that we are building communications across silos. And then all of a sudden, the silos aren't such a bad thing. In fact, they sort of melt away. They stop keeping us all separated from each other. And for those things, we really need to ask, what? What is this? What are you doing? What is the goal here? What are your thoughts behind this? Then once we understand that base level knowledge, then we can start getting into, oh, why did you make this choice? Or even instead asking, what choices are you making here? And then we can start thinking, how can I help to further those goals, or what knowledge do I have that can contribute to these goals? So that's two sides of our triangle. And if we stopped right there, honestly, if you just focus on some of those agile tenets that are incredibly valuable and some of those soft skills within the collaboration elements, honestly, I think you'll be in a good place. I know it's been incredibly helpful for projects I've been on. It's really improved our efficiency and improved our success rate at taking projects that maybe had a couple of strikes against it with us going into it and making sure that it didn't fall apart, bringing it back from the brink. And that's a really exciting thing to be able to do. But I do think there's a third line to this triangle, and that's the UX side. See, when we talked about Agile, I mentioned that it was intended initially to be just for developers, and now we're complicating things by bringing in design and content. And to me, the way that we can make those Agile tenets work really nicely with design and content being part of it is by making the focus not just on a workable product, but identifying that a workable product means workable by the user, right? So our working software, our pieces that are going into our, let me see if I can come up with a better way of defining this, but essentially our metrics for working software should include, is this usable? Is this accessible? Is it findable? Is it credible? Is it valuable? Is it desirable? Is it creating a good user experience? That's part of it being workable. There's this quote that I absolutely love from an article called Shipping an Empty Box. And John Lack says in that article, he says, the best UX design seems to be coming from designers implementing a release early, release often mindset. It favors responsiveness and nimbleness, and for most enterprises, it is incredibly difficult to do. To me, it sounds like he's saying, I mean, release early, release often, that's agile. He's saying that UX designers should be using agile. He's saying that we can actually improve the experience if we cut our projects into smaller bits and focus on one small piece at a time and then grow outward from there. If we figure out what our minimum viable product is, build that, and then improve upon it. So as a content strategist, I thought to myself, what can I make my manifesto? The Agile Manifesto, all right, they say that's for developers, fine. But I want one for content strategists. So I said, as a content creator, as somebody who builds the strategies and identifies how the people are going to work together and what process they're going to use, this is my manifesto. We will build intuitive user experiences. We will develop usable guidelines and strategies. We will adapt to Agile methodology, and we will increase cross-team collaboration. And then I thought, we need some principles behind this. So for my principles, I came up with these 5 content strategy principles. And I think that they'll help any team to put their agile tenets in place and to create better experiences. First of all, I highly recommend conducting research before the first sprint begins. Agile is becoming more and more popular. If you haven't had an experience with it yet, I bet you will within the year. But not a lot of people are thinking about the things that we've been talking about in this webinar. Not a lot of people are considering, how does it work for a content strategist working in that place? How does it work for a UX designer working within that work? Well, you usually find out that you're on a project 3 or 4 weeks before the project itself starts. And then you have to identify during what sprints you're going to focus on what pieces. Well, I recommend that you conduct research before even getting to that first sprint. Sometimes, at some companies in particular, you'll find out that you're starting on a project the day the first sprint has already begun. So in that case, you don't have that opportunity. And that brings us to principle number 2. Create a minimum viable content strategy. You're not going to have time to do everything. Agile moves fast. And as I've mentioned a few times, we got to cut down on the project work. Well, the same goes for content strategy. We're not going to have time for a full, beautiful, perfect gap analysis and audit and content inventory and competitive audit and then taking all of that and doing content mapping and, this, that, and the other. But you can start to prioritize which elements of a full content strategy are most valuable to this particular team and in this particular project. The most effective and the most valuable elements, those are the ones you need to do. Number 3, prepare for spontaneity. I know it doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but I keep a calendar kind of obsessively. And I think that I do that so I can prepare for spontaneity. So if somebody says to me, hey, do you want to go to Mexico tomorrow? I can take a look at my calendar, and if there's nothing on the calendar for the next 3 days, sure. Or if there's 1 or 2 things, then I can go, yeah, I can cancel that. I can go to Mexico tomorrow. Whereas I've noticed that a lot of people who don't set up that preparation and have those notes or that calendar or that organizational piece, when somebody says to them, do you want to go to Mexico tomorrow, they go, oh, I don't know. I don't really know what's going on the next couple days. Well, that's frustrating. The same thing happens in our projects. No, we can't say, oh, we're going to change the entire process today. Go! And everybody goes, yes, sir. But you can say, I'm going to start a document where I track every category that we use so that then in the future we decide that we want to migrate everything from one category to a totally new site, then we go, great, yeah, we can do that really fast because you've started sort of those documentation pieces as an organic process. Our 4th principle is to take advantage of the iterations. So when I mentioned in principle number 2 that we need to prioritize which content strategy elements we're using, one way to do that is to say, let's say we have no idea what voice we're going to use. We don't know if this is going to be an authoritative voice or a friendly voice. So we could say we're going to send off to the copywriters, or maybe we're writing our own copy, and we're going to create all of the content to be in the authoritative voice for sprint 3. And we'll do some testing at the end of the week. And then sprint 4, we're going to focus on changing all of that content to a friendly voice. And we'll test that at the end of sprint 4. Then in sprint 5, one of our goals will be to compare the results of the 2 and identify which is correct or what changes we need to make. So we can take advantage of those iterations that we should be improving and changing things constantly. And if your team has told you we're doing sprints, but in each sprint we need to focus on a totally different area of the site, then I'm so sorry, you're not doing agile. You're doing waterfall with very short deadlines. And number 5, try out pair programming. I'm a huge fan of pair programming. I don't code, I'm not a programmer, but I think it's such a cool way of working. Pair programming has 2 developers sit side by side with one of them sort of looking over the other's shoulder, and they take turns so that while one's coding and then when they get stuck, the 2 can work together to figure out the problem. And it's one of those things that seems like it wastes a lot of time, but in actuality, particularly if you pick and choose the areas where you're doing pair programming, it gives the people working the time to really improve upon the work that they're doing and make sure that they're getting through the sticky parts much faster. So the same thing can work for any other discipline. As a content strategist, I actually really like pair programming with a designer, either with the designer doing wireframes and me suggesting messaging as we go along, or vice versa if I'm building out a user journey with a designer looking over my shoulder and identifying where they had specific interaction ideas or where they want to make sure that certain things fit in. Another way that you can do this that I really enjoy is one person, so the designer sketches out a page, and at the same time, content strategist sketches out the same page in terms of where they want the messaging to go. Then you swap, and so you've got one version that's design first and one version that's messaging first, and then you can see where you had similar ideas going on and where you need to take a step back and rethink. So that is our 5 principles. I hope that I've left you with some good tools today. The last thing that I'll say before we turn over to questions is one of my favorite quotes from Michael Monteiro. Mike Monteiro won an award last year for the talk that includes this quote, and the talk's called How Designers Destroyed the World. I highly, highly recommend it. And what he says is, when you decide to become a designer, you accepted the role of gatekeeper with it. You are responsible for what you put into the world and for its effects upon that world. I try to keep that in mind every day. I believe that what we are putting into the world as UX designers, as content strategists, all of us, we are accepting an important role, and it's up to us to make sure that we are doing so with as much information as possible by communicating with everyone on our team. Thank you very much. Adam, do we have questions?
Yes, we do, and thank you, Morley, for this very informative webinar. The first question that has came in is, have you worked on projects where agile didn't work for the UX team?
Yes. Generally speaking, as I mentioned, the projects where agile doesn't work are the ones where it's a telephone version of agile. But there are also projects that are either so tech-heavy or so design-heavy that you really need to evaluate in the project what are the goals of the project, and if the goal is to, for example, migrate an extremely large amount of content. It's particularly if that content needs to be rearranged, it's going to be very difficult to break it down into the smaller pieces that you need for agile. So I do think that some projects are a better fit for agile than others. And as we take part in the Serve Agile craze, we need to take that into consideration.
Excellent, thank you. The second question that has come in is, do you have a specific example of how 2 content strategists can do a version of pair programming?
Yeah. It's kind of rare that I've been lucky enough to get to work with other content strategists on one project, but I've seen a couple of different exercises work nicely. One possibility is literally to do like a 5-minute exercise where everybody tries writing copy for a specific area that we're struggling with, and then going, either doing them on index cards or something else so that they can all be shuffled together, and then you can sort of get a sense of, on a much broader scale, coming from 3 or 4 people, 10 different ideas, 10 different tones, 10 different voices going on. Another option would be I've had situations where if I was just struggling with finding examples of what I was looking to say, honestly, it just comes down to sometimes two heads are better than one. And so if I can pull in another content strategist and either talk through with them the problem that I'm having, or literally set a goal for ourselves for the afternoon and discuss even the points that we don't think are going to need discussion to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're both defining these elements in the same way. And sometimes things will come up that will surprise me. An area that I thought was very simple, I'll suddenly realize we had totally different ideas on, or a section that I thought was particularly easy, all of a sudden we just come up with a better idea, and so it's still easy, but it's better now.
Excellent. Thank you, Molly. The next question that has come in is, would you recommend using a content collaboration tool like Gather Content or Jump Chart or anything along those lines?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Google Docs personally. I haven't found another that gives quite as much functionality, but it really depends what you're looking for. Anytime that you've got more than one person working on content, though, I think collaboration tools are necessary. I love Dropbox, but one thing I've noticed is if you have a Word doc in Dropbox and you forget to close it, which I'm frequently guilty of, and somebody else opens it to work on it, you end up with conflicting copies. That's something that the better collaboration tools, or the collaboration tools that are more intended for multiple people to be working in, are good about solving for.
Thank you. The next question that has come in is, can you talk about the role of technical writers regarding content strategy and how UX designers and writers should be working together?
Technical writers have such an interesting place in all of this for me. It's one of the many roles that just gets defined in so many different ways. I've seen technical writers who are expected to create a full content strategy on their own, and I've seen others that are much more comfortable in just a straight copywriting role. In either case, it's very important that they're a part of this process. A technical writer has the subject area expertise that a content strategist oftentimes doesn't. And so the content strategist should basically be interviewing the technical writer and having the technical writer review any decisions being made on the ongoing strategy. Because the technical writer is just, like I said, is going to have that subject area expertise, is going to know the details of things that are going to be very influenced by the strategy. In terms of working with the developers, it sort of depends. Are we talking about an agency coming in where the technical writer is in-house, or are we talking about an in-house team? Because for an in-house team, there's more likelihood that developers and even content strategists and other people in the team will share some of the knowledge that the technical writer has, whereas when we're talking about an agency, then it's like any other stakeholder. You really have to take advantage of the knowledge that the technical writer has and bring them in either through co-creation techniques. I don't often do pitches for UX Booth, but there is a great article that we had an author recently publish about co-creation, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for suggestions for working between an agency and in-house.
Thank you, Marley. And the last question that's come in is, have you worked on a project where there were only one or two UX people? Did you collaborate with non-UXers?
Yes. I think there's a thin line that's getting thinner between UX and non-UX. There are certainly people who have no UX experience and fully recognize that and sort of see themselves as separate, but more and more there are people who get some of the ideas behind UX and are either not comfortable calling themselves UX but still work with it, or are calling themselves UX but don't really work with it. I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And actually, we'll be talking about this more in next month's webinar. where we'll be speaking very specifically about the fact that it almost doesn't matter what those titles are. What's more important is making sure that you've got the people you need to gather the information that you need. So as a UX person, I've had many situations where I'm either as a consultant coming in and being literally the UX person, or sometimes where I'm working with an agency where we've got a creative side to the agency, which includes some people who have UX experience and some people who see themselves as just straight visual designers. And we're working with clients who are clearly not UX people, and tech people who, again, know some things about UX and maybe even naturally are following most of the best practices, but don't necessarily frame it in that way. My job is to make sure that since I do frame it in a very, what are the user needs, how do we accomplish those? Since I frame it that way, I just need to be checking in with them and seeing what goals they have and make sure that at no point do we let the business objectives override the user needs.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Marlene, for this, and we'd like to thank everyone for attending. This concludes today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version from the webinar archive section of our website, and you'll be receiving an email tomorrow with the URL to view the recording. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday, February 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Coming Up to Speed with XML Authoring in Adobe FrameMaker, being presented by Maxwell Hoffman, TechCom Evangelist of Adobe. Thank you everyone again for attending, and have a great day.